Power Project family, how's it going? We have an amazing episode today with two guests, Shawn Stevenson and his son, Jorden Stevenson. Shawn Stevenson has been running the Model Health Show. This show is the #1 nutrition podcast, and it has been for pretty much the past 8 or 9 years. So we got a lot of nutrition tips from Shawn, but he's also the best-selling author of 2 books. One, Sleep Smarter, which I bought like 3 or 4 years ago. Amazing book on sleeping. Get it today. And Eat Smarter, which he goes into nutrition rituals to add to your plan. But we learned a lot about nutrition. And another part of this episode, which is going to be coming later, we learned and talked a lot about some things that are going on today. So I'm going to stop talking, and I want you guys to enjoy this freaking such a good episode with Shawn and Jorden Stevenson. Power Project family. We're partnering with an amazing brand called Vuori. Now, Andrew, can you tell me your favorite piece of Vuori clothing?
Yeah, dude. I was so shocked when I pulled out the Strato Tech tee. I was like, okay, cool. Nseema's been talking about it. Mark's been talking about it. This was my first experience. And when I pulled it out, I'm like, oh, like this is different. I know this is gym apparel, like this is performance apparel, but I was like, I don't want to mess this up, but obviously it can handle it. So that for me, dude, that was like the biggest eye-opening thing. I was like, okay, now I get it. You know, What about you? What's your favorite piece?
Well, I love the Strato Tech tee because I'm wearing the Strato right now. I love the Ponto short because the Ponto shorts, like I wear those to chill at home, but I can also wear those to work out. But the feeling, like I have 2 of this same exact t-shirt, one 2XL that I wear during podcasts and stuff, and the XL I wear during working out. But I have 2 because it's just so, and this is the last thing I'm going to mention, right? The colors, bruh, they have so many sick colors that you just don't see in other workout gear. I dig it so much. Andrew, how can the people get it?
Yeah, you guys got to head over to vuori.com/powerproject. And when you do, you're going to get 20% off this amazing performance apparel. This is second to none. You can put them in comparison with the absolute most expensive, most popular brands, and Vuori is going to beat them out. So again, that's vuori.com/powerproject, vuori.com/powerproject. Links to them down in the description, as well as the podcast show notes. Head over there right now.
Shawn, what the hell is going on, buddy?
Hey, I'm here absorbing all the good vibes. You know, I mean, what can I say? This is world class, man.
Thank you. I appreciate that. What's with this beast that you got here with you?
I mean, it's just
You're claiming this guy is yours?
It's what I shoot out, man. You know, it's perfection.
Best swimmer.
He won.
He won. The best swimmer.
Double breaststroke.
Damn, you're pretty athletic, and I saw the dance moves on Instagram, and I ain't gonna lie, man. Did you see the dance moves?
I didn't. That's what I'm about to look up right now.
Motherfuckers got moves on top of moves. I don't even know what to call half that stuff, but it was impressive.
Like father, like son.
Oh, shit. You've been hiding all that?
Like I said. It's how I shoot him out, man.
Damn.
Replicas. Nah, I mean, he's amazing, man, you know, and this is just, it's a culture in our household as well, you know. Ever since he was a kid, I would, you know, even if we go to the grocery store or something, like when nobody's looking, I'm like trying to hit him with the cart and shit, and just run around. And then when adults are looking, I'm like, hey, stop, you know. So he has that good balance of being able to, you know, play it straight at the right time and then also act silly, have a good time.
I understand. If he can handle his dad, he can handle anything.
That's right. That's a fact.
That's like growing up I grew up with 2 older brothers, and they were always messing with me. I just grew up crying every day, crying. Now it's a lot harder to make me cry because they beat the crap out of me so much.
It's like my younger brother.
Got all those tears out.
Yeah. Get them out early on.
And are you from St. Louis originally, or is that where you
born and raised in St. Louis? Yeah.
That ain't easy living out there in some of those spots. I've been out there to visit First Form, and I remember they were telling me, they're like, just stay in your hotel.
Yeah, be careful. Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean,
I was like, oh, where should I go? What should I do? They're like, you should just stay in your hotel. I was like, okay, all right, I'll take your advice since I've never been here before.
Because we don't have a lot of prominent rappers, you know. Shout out to Nelly though. I mean, the time is kind of, you know, the sun has come down on that, but you know, we often people don't hear the fact that
got some coffee delivery going on.
Amazing. St. Louis has been the murder capital of the United States several times.
Damn.
You know, and so just growing up in that environment, most of my adult life, actually.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you. Wow. Thank you so much.
We just had coffee dropped off from the heavens.
You know, you're the first person to bring me coffee, like in my life.
Oh man.
I didn't tell you this. Yeah. I mean, I didn't drink coffee most of my years.
Oh yeah. I brought you coffee.
Yeah.
That's right.
You went to the cafe.
What did I go to like, I went to Bulletproof.
I don't know if we're dropping names here. Yeah. So you went to Bulletproof.
Yeah.
And I had never had somebody bring me coffee, you know, so that's when I fell in love with you. Yeah, man. So anyways.
That explains the text messages. Wow. In the middle of the night, man. Holy cow. It's not expected.
You up?
What you doing, bro? I'm trying to sleep. It's 2 a.m.
So most of my life I lived in Ferguson, Florissant, which Ferguson has become kind of infamous. You know, but when I lived there, I was going to University of Missouri, St. Louis. So I was commuting in and just trying to find a way to get out of the environment that I was in, and also to be able to help change the environment that I come from. So, you know, a lot of great, and also I lived in what's called a quote food desert. And so I didn't know that.
Explain that for us.
Sure.
We've
So
talked a little bit about that before on the show, but for those that don't know.
these are these cute political labels that are put on things to make it sound not as virulent, you know, because a food desert basically means I didn't have access to high quality food. I was inundated, surrounded by fast food and processed food companies. And this is
stores and stuff like that too, right?
As soon as I walk out my apartment complex, the first thing I see is a liquor store. And then across from that, there's Lee's Chicken, there's Dairy Queen, Papa John's, Domino's, Chinese food, but not like the Chinese food, like a nice Chinese restaurant. It's like bulletproof glass, you know, like extra MSG. And, you know, every fast food place you can name under the sun within a 1.5 mile radius of my house. I'm not exaggerating at all. And so, of course, that's what I'm going to eat. That's all I knew. And I didn't know that it was a difference. I just thought that it was just food. It's just stuff you eat. It was cheap. And this is a big part of my work the last few years is to help to explain and educate people on how can something so cost intensive. I actually just taught this to my youngest son. He's 10 years old yesterday. The economies of scale and how a burger, and I just asked him, what goes into making a McDonald's cheeseburger? A double cheeseburger, because that's what I used to get, 99-cent double cheeseburger. He was like 2 burger patties, cheese, bread, mustard, ketchup, onions. And then I was just like, do they just put the burger together and then like hand it to you? He's like, no, they put in something. They wrap it. There's wrapping. There's a paper that they give to you, a bag. There's a napkin. All this stuff goes into it. A lot of moving parts to make something that ends up being 99 cents. Versus, I pointed over to an avocado we had on the shelf that's $2.50. I'm just like, I can get 2 double cheeseburgers that cost a lot to make. They're very cost intensive with a lot of moving parts. These things fall off the fucking tree and it's $2.50. How is that possible? And what it really boils down to is here in the United States, a lot of folks don't realize this, but we have government subsidy programs that provide billions and billions of dollars every year for farmers to produce these cash crops that largely show up through the drive-through window. And so we know that our government, which means us, we're paying for it. They're investing in low quality food being served in low income communities primarily. Now, here's the question. Do we have data showing that this actually makes people sicker? And so in my latest book, I actually detailed a study published in JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association. They tracked the consumption of people who ate the most government subsidized foods. People who ate the most government subsidized foods had a 40% increase incidence of being obese. So we know for a fact that the way that our government is structured.
That's a large percentage considering the state of America in general anyway.
That's it. You know, our society is feeding the problem and then pointing the finger at people who are overweight or obese, like, what the fuck is wrong with you? You know, get off your ass, you're lazy, all these different things.
It's confusing for some people. They're like, well, I don't understand. These people don't have that much money. How are they gaining so much weight?
Yeah.
But it's like they have access to an insane amount of calories, and the foods that they're eating, they taste really good.
That's it.
And so you overeat just by eating a very small amount of food.
That's right. You know, my mother, so literally one place that we lived, I lived right next door to a crack house. It was like across the alley. There's like a little alleyway, a little pathway. And then there's a 4-family flat, and one of them was where, you know, they're making crack and selling. And so I lived in a 2-family flat. But and also this was one of the most incredible times in my life as well. Just there's so much creativity, you know, like the whole basketball crate, you know, all this, like it was so much fun being in this environment, but we didn't have much, but we kind of don't know in a sense. And so my mom, being in this state of poverty, if she's got $20 to feed 3 kids and herself and my stepfather, we're not going to get an organic rotisserie and some fresh, zucchinis and shit like that. Like you can't afford that. But you could feed everybody, get a full belly, and have money left over if you take that $20 to McDonald's. So it's just economically makes sense if you're going to survive.
And going to McDonald's is probably kind of fun.
Exactly.
Because like everybody likes it.
Man,
right?
I had my birthday party. One of my most memorable events of my life was that McDonald's birthday party. And now here's the thing though. Have you ever thought about how fucking creepy McDonald's is? Like really?
Oh, Ronald McDonald, he's a fucking pervert for sure.
You know what I mean? Like it.
And then that purple thing, whatever that is.
His name is literally Grimace. That's pain. That means pain. Thanos, like a reverse Thanos.
And he's a fat blob, big fat purple blob.
And then they've got the Hamburglar. They got a criminal on their staff. He's a convicted felon. It's just like you can't make this shit up, man.
Did any of you guys play at McDonald's as a kid? Like, remember when they had like
That ball pit?
the ball pit and stuff?
Yeah, the playhouse.
I played in that, yeah.
Hell yeah.
Man, I took this kid to
Yeah.
fast food all the time.
Well, in college, like, was that what you studied in college? Was it nutrition stuff? Like, how'd you get into, like, you're the #1 nutrition podcast.
Yeah.
So how did you get into learning about all that? And why specifically did you get into focusing on nutrition?
Yeah, it's a great question. So when I went to college initially, and so I graduated in 3 years of high school, but not by choice. I got kicked out for a year. And I got accepted to every university I applied to, but I had 2 young kids. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I had my daughter, but then, he was coming shortly thereafter. And so I went to a private university that was close to St. Louis, in St. Charles, the city over. And I went pre-med because of television. Like I didn't know anybody who was a doctor except like when I go to the doctor. I didn't see any of that in my environment, but I did that because I thought it was the right thing to do to be successful. But the thing is, I hated science. Like, I hated it. I just didn't understand, like, why does this matter? Why are we like dissecting a fucking worm? Like none of that. Like I didn't like biology, human anatomy and physiology. There wasn't any connective tissue for me, which was actually a really great gift. And what it was it was the way that I was taught. That's the thing. And so when I went to this university, I saw I was experiencing a lot of suffering because I hated going to class. And so I just got out of it. And I shifted over because of TV again, because of a movie called Boomerang, Eddie Murphy, Boomerang. Do you remember that?
That's a great movie.
It's a great movie. And he was in marketing.
He's got a weird thing about feet in that movie, right?
I didn't see it.
Yeah, the hammer toe. He had the hammer toes, hammer time in her
He
shoe.
hooks up with like some seriously hot women, and a couple of them have like weird feet, and he's like,
Can't do it. I can't do it. She has a bunion. So, but he was in marketing. So I was like, I'll do that. So that was the kind of representation I would see. Even when I went pre-med, it's because of the Cosby Show, to be honest. I didn't want to drop names, because who knows
yeah.
what's going on there.
We got you.
But anyway, so as all of this is taking place, I have a massive breakdown of my own health. And I was going to the university gym, like doing these late night lifting sessions, and I looked fit, but I was literally making my body out of fast food. Like every meal that I ate was fast food or
And you were
fast
still
food like from the
lean
cafeteria.
at that time?
Yeah, I looked fit. I had a 6-pack, that whole thing, but I was made out of just the worst possible shit. And that's the thing that folks, this is a very foundational understanding for everybody to take on, is that every single cell in your body is made from what you put in there. You get to make your body out of these materials. The human body is incredibly resilient. It will take whatever you put in there and try and figure that shit out. But because of this, I was diagnosed with this degenerative disc disease. So my discs were just rapidly deteriorating. I broke my hip at track practice just from running, because my bone density was so low. And my doctors were just like, I'm sorry, this is incurable. I'm sorry this happened to you. Like this whole kind of standard of care. Here's some drugs, bed rest. I'm sorry, you're gonna have to live with this. And I got a second and third opinion, but it was the same bill of goods. And what got me into this field and where I am today, and I'm so grateful that happened, it was the worst time of my life. I lived in Ferguson, mattress was on the floor. At this point I had 2 kids. He'd sleep on an air mattress that had a hole in it. Like he would go to, tell them about that.
Yeah, I go to sleep with my sister on the floor on the air mattress, and I'll wake up leaning against her because she was so much bigger. and the air mattress all be linked to one side.
Right.
So he's basically collapsed on the floor in the morning, And so just trying to get
Shoulders
by.
all falling asleep and stuff, all
Yeah,
kind of
right.
stuck in one position, right?
And so, having that experience where I'm told that you have this so-called incurable condition, and I didn't realize this, and this is just a little psychology piece. And you know about this, how powerful our minds are. Like, this is how you built all the things that you have, it's your mind first. But physiologically, a lot of folks have heard of the placebo effect, but we don't really understand, like in randomized placebo-controlled trials, the gold standard of clinical trials, we have to account for the placebo working. The fake drug, the fake treatment, a sham surgery. We've got data on all this stuff showing that on average, placebos are about 33% effective in clinical trials. So somebody believing that this is going to lower their blood pressure, normalize their blood sugar, reduce their symptoms of depression, break down their cancer tumor, the list goes on. And if anybody wants to look up a good, kind of concentrated book on it, Mind Over Medicine by Dr. Lissa Rankin. But anyway, so the placebo effect is kind of getting a positive injunction that something beneficial is going to happen.
There's even like phantom surgeries where they will slice someone open and not do anything.
Yep.
And the person feels that they're healed.
Yep. And clinically, they can actually see like their meniscus actually repairs, for example. And we've got data on all this stuff. It's crazy because of the power of the human mind. Now that can even sound very superficial, but your mind literally creates your brain, for example. They're not the same thing. There's a governing kind of meta thing that every thought you're thinking is creating your brain, it's creating your physical tissue. And every thought you think releases correlating chemistry. So right now we can get into a place where we get really stressed and we start releasing more adrenaline and cortisol just because of the way we're thinking. Or we can shift our thoughts and start to think of things that are more affirmative and joyful and start to change that chemistry. We'll start releasing more oxytocin. Like right now, if we're vibing, we're in oxytocin. Women do oxytocin very well, for example. And this is just another one of those things that helps women to live longer, But here's the point. Besides the placebo effect, there's the nocebo effect. And this is one of the most important understandings of our lifetime. Because right now, with all that's going on in the world, a lot of folks aren't aware that some of the biggest fields of medicine are psychoneuroimmunology, how your psychology affects your immune system, and psychoneuroendocrinology, how your psychology affects your hormonal cascade. And so a nocebo effect is when you get a negative injunction from an authority figure. So for example, my doctor told me that I went in, I was just having a nuisance of a pain, like my leg wasn't working because of sciatic pain. And after he tells me this is incurable and I have this condition that's I'm never going to get better, I went from a nuisance of a pain to chronic debilitating pain like a week later. And I've been dealing with that for like 2 months. And what happened is this nocebo effect. You'll never walk normally again. People, and in my clinical practice, people come in, I've even heard this before. People getting told, you got 6 weeks to live. You'll never walk again. This is incurable. And if you take that in from an authority figure, and let me give a tangible example, because this can also sound very, meta. Dr. Alia Crum out of Stanford University, she did this prick test, all right? So I'm just saying prick test because we're on the Mark Bell podcast, all right? But a skin prick test. And so it was to get a histamine reaction in test subjects. And so they gave him this kind of this skin prick, and it created this rash. And so what they did was they gave the patients one of two different messages. One set of people were told, we're going to give you this cream that's going to help the rash to go away. The other folks were told, we're going to give you this cream that's going to make the rash worse, right? So an agonist and an antagonist, all right? And so now here's the thing. The cream was completely inert. It had no therapeutic benefit whatsoever. But the people who were told that this is going to make the rash get better, their rash got better within 10 minutes. They were told this by a reputable physician, right? Somebody that they believed. And other folks who were told that this is going to make your rash worse, it got worse within 10 minutes.
Was it like a certain percentage of the people that were told, or all of the?
Every single person. It is a spectrum on how much it changed, but everybody had a change in the direction that they were given this injunction.
Woo.
Now this is the key. Now here's the key. The magnitude of how much it changed was based on how much the person felt that the doctor was competent. How much they trusted the doctor is how much their skin changed, right? So that's the nocebo effect. It's getting it from an authority figure. Who's the big authority figure right now for most folks? It's their television. You know, it's their favorite news personality. They've got to, even though the so-called trust of the news is at an all-time low, that's superficial because there's a gateway open in people's minds for people who they deem to have the answers, and it just bypasses your logic.
We almost have a little bit of like back to your food desert thing where you could say, hey, look, a lot of these people in a food desert, they have choices. And you're like, well, no, not like, okay, maybe they kind of sort of have choices, but not really. And I think the same thing would be true with the news. Like, yeah, you could just ignore but like who's actually got the power to ignore the news? Like you need to be a powerful, healthy person who's already maybe studying stuff, who's already maybe a little bit ahead. It's hard to be that person to be like, no, I'm not going to listen to not only the news, but any of the news. Yeah. And then any of the stuff that comes from social media that might make you panic, that might make you feel a certain type of way. Absolutely.
It's kind of like a detox has to take place. Because what would happen is people, they're like, well, yeah, the news, there's a lot of bullshit here. It's a lot of, lying, manipulation, fear. But I got to stay informed. Like I'm just watching for the weather. That's what I would do. But next thing you know, you're roped in, And so, but here's where everything changed. So after 2 years of suffering, and I gained a lot of weight, and I was in such pain that I was literally afraid of getting up off my couch, which he knows this. I had this little love seat, which I can't even call it a couch if you can carry it by yourself.
You're like,
but the side that I sat in broke through. My fat ass broke it. And so I had pillows under there, and I would still have girls. Oh, never mind. It was just anyways. So it got to that place where I'd gained all this weight, and I didn't recognize a person I saw in the mirror. And it was kind of this moment, this epiphany happened. I was really at rock bottom, and I seen this last physician who somebody recommended. He's gonna help me. He told me the same thing. And so at this point, all of these folks are telling me I can't get better. And I realized that I've been outsourcing my potential to these people who don't walk in my shoes. They mean well. They're telling me what is based on their clinical experience. But I hadn't done anything myself to get better. And what I did was I realized, and this is so simple, but most people miss this. When I realized this, I just made a decision. I just made a decision to get better. I just decided. And when I did that, it wasn't just, again, the clouds parted and just everything got better instantaneously, but I decided and then I moved in that direction. The next day I got up and went to the gym for the first time in those 2.5 years. And I could barely walk correctly. So I just went to the stationary bike. It was hard. It was embarrassing. The next week I just, I got on the elliptical, did a little walking. And the next week I picked up a few dumbbells. And that was the low-hanging fruit.
Where do you think that resilience came from to have that mindset? Because some people, they don't ever get out of that stuck mindset. Was it growing up in kind of a tough neighborhood, or was it your parents, or what do you think
it was my
gave you that resilience?
It was my grandmother. The first part of my life, I lived with her, in a, quote, good neighborhood. And she just immersed me in all these beautiful things. It was safe, a lot of certainty, versus when I moved in with my mother. There's a lot of violence. I wake up in the morning, there's blood on the floor, people fighting, and a lot of abuse of all types. And in that environment with my grandmother, she instilled in me, that's where I fell in love with learning. And now I've got these 2 massive best-selling books, which is crazy. And it started from me sitting at this table with her with this little Garfield writing book. And I'm just like, I can make whatever I want. I could just say whatever I want. And falling in love with education then. And this is why, and to answer your question, she led me to believe that I was going to do something remarkable with my life. Even when I went to that other environment, which I know that broke her heart to be there. I just felt like I was carrying the potential of my family to break all these patterns on me. And now here I was in this apartment by myself, can't even recognize who I am. And I had forfeited all this shit. And then I realized, no. Because all this time, my grandmother was still calling me, being a grandmother, just basically bothering me. I'm like, I'm fine, Grandma, I'm fine. But I was not fine, And I realized that all the greatness that she saw in me, it was up to me to access it. And I'd already fought through so much to get to this point. So that's really what it was. You know, I felt like I had somebody counting on me. I had people that were counting on me. You know, I wanted to be an example for him. And so I just took that as my thrust and motivation. And once you do that, when you really make a decision with like that, there's no other possibility. Like, I cannot fail. And so, you know, cut to, it was actually 6 weeks later, which the result's not typical. I lost about 18 pounds in 6 weeks. But I was always kind of the thinner guy in my family, a lot of obesity in my family. I was like the skinny kid. But there's the FTO gene. There's all these different genes associated with, you know, obesity, but it definitely kicked on for me. And now the weight just flew off of me. So the movement was one thing, but the game changer, there's two, was changing my nutrition. My first logical idea was like, okay, I've got this degeneration happening with my spine and pain. What if I lose some of this weight? Take some of the pressure off my back. But then I asked a simple fundamental question. Okay, if my bones are deteriorating, my disc, what are they made of? All I knew about was calcium from commercials and shit, you know? And so I was in college still, and I just went to the school computer lab and I just started to research. There was like 30 or 40 other things that the bones are made of, require in order for bone density, and many of them more important than calcium. Calcium just had marketing, you know? And none of these things, like I was getting like 2 of those things in my drive-through diet. And so I just started the first thing, just to be honest, I became a natural pill popper. I was like, I need this supplement, very expensive for my broke ass, first of all. But, you know, I saw some results. But then shortly thereafter, I asked, okay, what foods can I find all these things in? And then I just start to flood my body with all of these nutrients. And so now I'm making my body out of sustainable materials, right? So my disc, for example, you know, sulfur-bearing amino acids, omega-3s, hydration. Your disc are mostly water, but here's the crazy thing about your disc. Your discs don't get hydrated directly. They get hydrated through a process called remote diffusion. Okay. And so essentially, this is also why just through the day, you actually lose height because of gravity. Like, so the discs kind of get dehydrated. And so in order for your disc to get fully kind of hydrated and access all the water that is available, kind of your discs are like a lower tier of priority for your body. Its priority is your blood, your brain. Your brain is like 80% water. So you have to provide your body with enough hydration that it can even like get to your disc. And I think, again, you hear this stuff like you can only go a certain amount of time without water. I've disproven this shit. I was drinking like maybe a glass of water a day and like Hawaiian punch. You know what I mean? Wow. Yeah. Like, and this was just my normal. And then of course, there's sometimes when you're just thirsty as a motherfucker. Maybe every couple of days, I might just down a bunch of water.
But also when you don't know, like you'll drink like a Slurpee and you'll think like that's gonna hydrate you.
But
or
you're
something.
still doing a little bit of working out too at this point, right? So you were.
Yeah. So now I'm moving, and now I'm bringing in higher quality raw materials. Okay. And this was the key. I came across a study that was done on racehorses looking at increasing bone density. And so they had a test group of horses, and basically, you know, this is a crazy business, by the way. I don't know if you guys know anything about the horse race. It's like $1 billion whole thing. And so if a horse breaks their leg, like you can lose tens of millions of dollars in profits. And so they had the study group. They had the control group who did nothing to the horses. Then they had a study group that gave them supplements, like I was taking. And that did increase their bone density. But then they had another group, and this is what's missing in the study. They walked the horses and gave them nutrition. They had an even higher increase in their bone density. That's what exercise, one of its primary functions. The side effect is physique, but exercise is really about assimilation of nutrients. And the word exercise is very close to the word exorcise, right? So it's just like to get things out of you in a sense, like an exorcism, you know? So it's just like also detoxification is literally required movement. If you're not moving, your body is just like a cesspool. And so now that I'm moving and bringing in these nutrients, my assimilation goes up. And then the final piece was, once I started doing all this good stuff for myself during the day, my sleep got better. The worst part in that 2.5 years was my sleep, because it was literally a nightmare. I could only sleep a couple of hours and I'm waking up in pain. And so I was taking all these medications, stuff that's like even kind of pulled off the market now, you know, for like arthritic conditions and sleep pills. But it was like a pseudo sleep. And so once my sleep got better, man, I got better so fast.
I got to mention this, or people need to know. I read your book, Sleep Smarter, years ago, and that was an amazing book. It taught me a lot about sleep. But what's the other book that you mentioned? I didn't know you had another book out.
Yeah, my latest book is Eat Smarter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, and by the way, and I'm honored to say this now, we're actually here at a year that it came out in a couple of weeks as of this recording. The week that it came out, it was the #1 new release in the United States.
Damn.
Whoa.
Yeah. For a couple of days, and it sold out. And so it was like on the list with like the Obamas and like Matthew McConaughey and all this.
Hell yeah.
Then there was this book on food and nutrition from this kid from Ferguson, Missouri. You understand? Like, it's so beautiful, man. It was so inspiring because all that's happening in the world, it gave me another affirmation that people care about this. We might not know, because in my clinical practice, I never met one person who didn't want to be healthy. They might have a story in their mind that they can't because of fill in the blank. They might have developed learned helplessness because of failures in the past. Everybody wants to feel good, you know? And so to put the cherry on top of the story, once I started getting better, and I was still at my university, people started coming up to me. Literally, it was like that. And I know you've had this happen. And so my professors would multiple times stop me on the way out of class, like, what did you do? And I'm just like, what the fuck did I do? Like, you know? And they're like, you look so healthy. I didn't look like a guy who just lost weight. I looked like a guy who was healthy. Mm-hmm. And so they asked me if I can help them, you know? And so my professors, fellow students, faculty members at the university, they were all my first clients. And I shifted my coursework back to biology and kinesiology. Still miseducated in school, by the way. That education is not accurate. Most of my education, of course, was through the research that I was doing. And also today, primarily I work as a research scientist. But then I opened my clinical practice as a nutritionist. So I did a lot of consulting work and working with businesses and individuals, working with a lot of chronic diseases. A lot of people told the same story as me. There's nothing you can do about this. Man, on a daily basis, I saw I'm a very science-minded, logical person. Mm-hmm. If I didn't know any better, it would seem like a miracle. You know, like we couldn't even really say that type 2 diabetes was completely reversible. You know, there's so much strange litigation around it. But today it's just common knowledge. And so what I would do is just teach people how their body works. Here's how your pancreas works, your beta cells and alpha cells. Here's how, you know, your liver is working in operation with, you know, lipogenesis and creating fat, all this stuff. And I would see the light come on in their eyes, like, oh shit, I didn't know that was happening to me. I can actually do something about this. But over time, it got to the place where I was doing this every day, and it pulls a lot from you, by the way. But I felt like I need to write this shit down. Like, I'm only helping like one person at a time, and it's taking a toll. Let me record this or write it down. And that's when I started my show and writing books.
What year was that the show started? Because it's been going on for a minute.
Yeah, over 8 years ago. But before that, I was the face of another big podcast brand.
Really?
Yeah. So I was speaking at an event because primarily what I did was I ran my clinical practice and I was speaking. Those are the two things that I was doing.
Okay.
And so I did a TEDx talk in Las Vegas. This was probably 2011, maybe.
Wow.
And so this couple came up to me, and they had this massive online wellness site. And they said, you know, we're just starting a podcast. We think it'd be great. And they told me the numbers they were doing because I had just started my website. And we have this, like, if you build it, they will come ridiculous idea. Nobody was coming to this website. But all my friends were like, who did your website? It's amazing. It doesn't matter if nobody's coming to it. And so they told me they had like 2 million unique visitors a month or whatever it was. And I was like, word? Okay. And I just want to help people. I didn't care about the money part because they ended up making a lot of money from me. But so I became the face of that brand. We had hundreds of thousands of downloads of that podcast. Back then, it was like a unicorn, crazy. You know. But eventually from there, I pivoted and started my own show.
A lot of times you'll hear people say, and I think it's like well-meaning. I think that people are saying this just to labor the point that it's not going to be easy. But you'll hear people often say that there's no magic diet. And I always am like, I don't know about that, man, because I've seen a lot of magical, mystical shit go down when people get on a nutrition plan to where their entire life changes.
Right.
They not only are losing body fat, which sometimes can be crippling in and of itself. I think that like less movement, promotes less movement, and success breeds success, and more movement promotes more movement, and so on, to a certain extent. But I've seen like all kinds of miraculous things happen where some people, having like Michaela Peterson on the podcast and having other folks come on and they'll say, yeah, man, my hip, my knee, my foot, my ankle, my this, my that was in tons of pain when I was eating, bagels every day. And you're kind of like, that's bullshit. You're kind of thinking to yourself, like logically, there's just, come on, gluten can't be that bad, or whatever the hell's in a bagel or whatever. Yeah. You're like, come on, bro, like quit being a pussy. You're kind of thinking, like, it's not possible. But there's so many people that tell you so many things that kind of, where it seems like sometimes some of this stuff is like metaphysical or magical. It seems like that's been your experience.
Yeah. There's many paths to the goal, first of all, but food is a powerful one because it is so visceral. Like what you eat affects your psychology, right? So it makes it easier to think affirmative things that change your chemistry, right? It all feeds into each other. And so, but it's also so overlooked how powerful food is. And also, it has all of these, I want to give a good example for people. Everything in this room right now came from nature. Somehow, right? It doesn't look like it at all. There's a fucking sword here, a plastic sword. It doesn't, maybe it's real. No,
it's real.
For the listeners, it's real.
Don't go picking that up, swinging around.
Sorry, no disrespect. So everything in this room came from nature. And the same thing with us. Like as we're looking at each other, I'm seeing what you've eaten. It is that powerful. Like I'm seeing you're the result of the food that you've eaten, the nutrition you've taken in, or the lack thereof. And so that's how powerful food is. But we don't think about it in that context because in our culture, it's not respected. Food is just something it's a social thing, and it's just, and it's often just a pleasure of the mouth type thing, right? Versus our ancestors, they had much closer relationship because they had to fucking work to get their food. That part has been lost in the process to where you don't have to do shit.
Spend a lot of energy to get energy.
That's it. Now we don't have to do anything. Literally, you can have the DoorDash person like come right, like, hey, door's open. You don't even have to get up, let alone do any work for it. And so we've lost touch with the relationship with food. And so, of course, we're going to have a big break in our psychology on how food can actually create and change our physiology, right? And so just to hammer this point home, as I mentioned before, when I mentioned the meniscus, the intervertebral disc, your brain is literally made from the food that you eat, right? So theoretical physicist Michio Kaku, he's like modern day Einstein to a lot of people. He said that the human brain is the most complicated object in the known universe, right? It's made of fucking food. It's made of food. It
has macronutrients to it.
That's it. And so I know, I just did a lecture for neuroscience department at NYU maybe 2 weeks ago. So I know all of these incredible, and that's just one example. I do all this cool stuff now, but I know all these incredible thinkers, these neuroscientists, and they're looking at an organ and studying this organ. They don't even know what they're looking at. I know the top cardiologist in the world. His focus is the cardiovascular system in the human heart, but he's not taught in school that the heart is made from fucking food. Like there's a fundamental break in the understanding. Here's a little interesting thing, for example, epicardial fat, right? We think of the heart as a muscle. The heart actually is about 20%, the weight of the heart is 20% fat, all right? Epicardial fat. This is a visceral fat of the heart, visceral fat. Now, visceral fat is that deep abdominal fat, or also known as omentum fat. This is most correlated with chronic disease if you have too much of it. Same thing with the heart. This is one of the biggest issues even happening right now with this issue that's going on in a lot of people's minds, this infectious disease, myocarditis, all these different things, is strongly related to epicardial fat. There's a new paper that just came out a couple of weeks ago. I just did a show about it. And so the growing of that, by you bringing in abnormal food substances and growing abnormal amounts of visceral fat of your heart, you could die. Not just from this infectious disease, but from all manner of other diseases. And it's based upon what are you making your tissues out of? Those specific heart cells are made from the raw materials you give it. Your body will do rob Peter to pay Paul to put together a heart for you. Like, hey, there you go. This is what you got to work with. or you can give yourself really sustainable and this is the thing about the body too. It will preferentially choose the higher quality stuff whenever you give it the opportunity. The body is so much much smarter than us. And the thing is, what we're doing even right now is that we have this ignorant idea that we are smarter than nature. We're smarter than our bodies. We're not even remotely close. I know a lot about nutrition, for sure. But still, we don't know shit.
Yeah.
Like, there are thousands of different compounds we don't even know that exist right now. And so, it's exciting, but also I think that the greatest teachers in this are always going to be humbled. They're going to realize how little we know, and also bask in the joy of the things that we do know now.
Power Project Familia, how is it going? Now, working with a lot of different clients and also talking to so many different coaches that have come onto this show, I've seen that and I understand that people have cravings. We all have cravings. And the crazy thing and the rough thing is that when you're dieting, you can't just eat as many donuts or eat all the cereal you want to eat. But that's why we have good, healthy treats. And our new sponsor, Magic Spoon, has amazing cereal. Now, number one, a lot of cereals have a lot of carbohydrates and a lot of sugar. Let me tell you the macros on this. 0 grams of sugar, 4 grams of net carbs, 14 grams of protein per serving, and 140 calories per serving. Let's not neglect the fact that even though these macros might be good, a lot of times these healthy snacks taste like cardboard and crap. But when you eat Magic Spoon, when you take your first bite, you're going to be reminded of the childhood cereal you used to eat. I'm serious, bro.
Yes, no,
when I had that peanut butter, man, I was like, oh my God, is this Reese's Pieces? Like, I was like, damn, man, it's good.
Yeah.
So you guys need to check them out. Andrew, how can people learn more about it?
Absolutely. And there's one more thing I wanted to add. So like my wife, she has a gluten intolerance. I believe she has celiac disease. So cereal in general is just, sometimes it's hard to find. Most cereals are gluten-free, but like all the fun ones aren't. So another amazing thing about Magic Spoon is it is gluten-free. So if you do have a sensitive stomach, you have no issues here. So head over to magicspoon.com/powerproject. You guys will see the variety pack. That's really the best way to kind of dip your foot into this bowl of cereal, because you're going to be able to try different flavors and figure out which one you like the most. So again, that's at magicspoon.com/powerproject. You'll receive $5 off that variety pack. Links to them down in the description, as well as the podcast show notes. Head over there right now.
Was your grandmother, was she religious?
Not really.
I sometimes think that some people from kind of long ago, like if you ask grandma about the heart and the brain, I think she would have information that would be on par with these experts that you're talking about, just because of like intuition and shit that's been passed down from generation to generation. It's fascinating. I heard Joe Rogan had somebody on his show recently talking about consciousness and like getting into that whole world. Yeah. And basically, when you start to ask people these questions, you ask like a Neil deGrasse Tyson and some of these experts about things that they've been studying forever. They are usually the most courageous people to say, we actually don't know. Every time it kind of comes back to that same thing. Like the more that you study it, the kind of less that you realize. You're like, man, there's a lot of stuff that is unknown. So I think it's promising in a way that there's a lot of stuff that we don't know. But sometimes it's also kind of disheartening, because you're like, man, how do we not know?
Yeah.
We've been studying this shit for so long.
Yeah, that's the beauty of it, And I just want to share this little thing. When you mentioned my grandmother, one thing that she did have me do every night, we had a routine. We say my prayers. I take the bath, say the prayer, this little nighttime song that we would say. And, she tucked me in. There was this consistency, there was a routine, there was certainty attached to it. And another thing that people are struggling with today is a lack of routine, especially when we become adults. And then like my son here, when you don't have somebody who's like, it's bedtime, Jorden, and then you start to haphazardly have this abnormal structure. Mm-hmm. And then for a lot of people, that gets ingrained for their lifetime, especially with all the stuff we have today to consume, so we don't have that evening routine. And the brain is always looking for patterns as well. And so one of the best ways to improve your sleep quality, now, I work with these folks at Stanford University, all these great scientists, is to just simply create a nighttime routine. Like we've got our daily success structure, morning routines are popping. People want to know what the morning routine is, success routine. Your evening routine is even more important, because it's going to determine what your morning routine looks like, your sleep quality. And so I'm just going to throw this out there for people to think about that. I actually have, and it's not always, I love having my son here because he knows this. My wife she's a rule breaker. Like even last night, I'm like, babe, it's 9, trying to, wind down, turn things off. She's like, just 10 more minutes, like with this show, and I have to have the resolve and to stick to this routine. I have an alarm.
Women don't seem to care about a lot of these rules.
Of course. Like, what am I going to do? Like, if she really wants me to, she knows how to get me to do whatever she wants. So, but I have a routine at night to shut down. And I just recommend people do this. Give yourself a screen curfew, right? It's one of the easiest ways you can improve your sleep quality, because researchers at Harvard have affirmed just being on your device at night, that blue light, white spectrum, it's not just the blue light. That's kind of what's popularized. But it's signaling your brain it has not evolved having access to this stuff for eons, for centuries, thousands and thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years. Mm-hmm. We had light when it was day and it was dark at night, and you had fire, depending on when in evolution we're talking about. So when you are blasting this into your optical receptors in the evening, it's fucking up your circadian timing system. Your brain is like, I don't know what time it is. Like, what is this trying to tell me? It's always trying to sync up. And I said this earlier, that psychoneuroimmunology is one of the fastest growing, probably the fastest growing field of medicine is circadian medicine. Looking at how the timing of the day and the timing that you're doing things affects your health. It's fascinating stuff. So if you can give yourself a screen curfew, at least 30 minutes, just give yourself 30 minutes to be off the screens. And, maybe this is a time you do a little reading, listen to a podcast. You don't got to stare at a screen to do that. Mm-hmm. Audio book, talk to somebody, just like maybe you could talk to your significant other. I know it's a lot of pressure, but like find something else to fill that gap. Yeah. The hardest thing is when you tell somebody to stop doing something that might be harming them and try to replace it with something that is lesser value. You got to find something that you like and that you enjoy to fill that spot with.
Since we're talking about sleep right now, and getting better sleep was one of the biggest things for helping you get better at that time. First question is, people have been going kind of wild about blue light blockers. We use blue light blockers. I notice it does help me feel a little bit sleepier at that time. But we've also heard some people like Huberman has mentioned that it might not be that big of a deal. I'm curious, do you still feel the same about blue light blockers? And then also, you wrote a whole book on it. So I honestly suggest that people buy that book, Sleep Smarter, because I learned a fuck ton from it. But if you have maybe 3 to 5 biggest tips to be able to improve your sleep quality, what would those be? Just because we know that sleep is like literally the biggest thing for gaining more muscle, helping your hormonal health, recovery, all of that stuff.
What have I been doing for years in the evening as far as the blue light blocking glasses?
I mean, you pop them on every night. They're sitting right there where you sit every single night. You got like 3 pairs for some reason. I don't know why you got 3 pairs.
Is there a specific brand you recommend? There's a lot of brands out there.
He's been through construction glasses that wrap around his head. So now he's got like more stylish ones that's just like.
Do you do this since you see him do it so much? Or
being that my dad is considered the sleep guru, ironically, I don't do a lot of the things. I'm gonna just say it's a young adult thing, I guess. I don't know.
I feel it. Okay.
Shawn, would you agree that maybe there's not a lot of reason to investigate some of this stuff if you don't? Like, he probably just is running well. I mean, he looks extremely healthy. He's working out like a madman with us today.
He has a good barometer as when he needs to check himself too, because he's experimented so much. I've been there to point out times throughout his life when something happens, like, you see, this is a result of this, to like push that in, so he just has that cognitive association.
Son, I told you to wear those glasses.
And he'll call it like a week or 2 weeks before something actually bad happens. I don't know how he does it, but like a year ago, I got really sick because I wasn't sleeping and I was waking up like 5 a.m. to go to the gym, and they just caught up with me, and he called it way before I actually got sick.
Yeah, it was a couple weeks beforehand because I could see it coming. I loved the fact that he had that dedication. What other, he was like he was turning 20 at the time. What other 19, 20-year-old kid is getting up at 4:30 and getting to the gym and is about that life and is inspiring people? And just like, it was amazing. But also, my guy, like, you can't be up till 1 though, fucking around with these girls. Like, something's gotta give, And so, but also he there's a joy there. There's a juice that you get by, lifting those weights, And so but because of that, it can blind you to the other part, right? And so, just within this vein, as he mentioned, this is probably maybe 7, 8 years ago. I was like, as he mentioned, I was wearing construction glasses like these, and I don't know how my wife dealt with me, but I was always doing these experiments long before these things became in vogue. And actually, a lot of these blue light blocking companies have, of course, reached out to me and utilized the data that I've been putting out to build their company, to leverage it. Mm-hmm. And, so I don't want to recommend any particular brand. Okay. They're all pretty comparable. But really what we're looking at is there's a tremendous amount of anecdotal data. Like you just mentioned, when you put them on, you notice I get sleepy. Mm-hmm. There's a neuroassociation there. Something is happening biologically as well, which is wonderful. We don't want to discount that anecdotal data, but as far as peer-reviewed evidence, it's scant. There is a little bit though. We do have a little bit of data, but these are things that are not getting a lot of funding to get tested, to do randomized controlled trials. But so what we're looking at here is, do I think they're effective? I wouldn't do it if I didn't, Yeah. And what it is giving us an opportunity to, you could still, if you got a little work to do, you could be on your, watch a show, whatever, not take as big of a hit because it's changing. It's like warming the tone of light that you're getting, because what we would have is moonlight or fire. Mm-hmm. And so this is kind of simulating fire type color, right? But there's also something to be said to being off the device because of the stimulation of being on the device as well. So I think it's kind of like protection in a sense, It's like, if you're going to do it, you might as well use some protection, because you don't really know where the internet has been. You know what I mean? You think the internet is faithful to you, but it's definitely out there on the streets. So wear a little bit of protection at night. You get me? And so having that as a strategy, also on desktop, I just got a new desktop computer. It's already built in, with the new Mac. They got the screen, the night shift. Night shift. That's it. Night shift. They got night shift. There is.
You talked about that when I was on your show. I think I don't remember if it was when I was on your show, but you mentioned all this is coming, you were predicting it back then.
Yeah,
a couple years ago.
And the thing is, it's a preemptive thing I think from these tech companies, because they know it's kind of like I think about the movie Super Size Me, where they start to have lawsuits because McDonald's is making me fat, right? Where again, that's not necessarily true. In some instances, there is some manipulation going on there. You still have your personal decision, but it's all like a chemical soup. The same thing here. These tech devices are so addictive. And now we have very strong data showing the correlation with sleep disruption and increasing risk of cancer, increasing risk of cardiovascular disease. So I just shared this the other day. The World Health Organization, who everybody seems to be looking towards right now. So I like to use people's own data. If you really want to listen to them, listen to this. They tracked about 700 men for 14 years to see what would happen if they were consistently sleep deprived. And they found that when men were not getting sufficient amounts of sleep over this 14-year study period, they had twice as many heart attacks as people who got enough sleep and 4 times as many strokes. All right? There's something absolutely miraculous that sleep does that nothing else can do.
Yep.
And what it is, some of the things is that it's the primary. Sleep is the most anabolic state you could be in. Just being awake is catabolic. All right. We can produce and trigger the anabolic secretion of hormones, absolutely. But you get the biggest skeet of HGH when you go to sleep.
Right. Need to start doing this show from bed.
Skeet.
That's
so
incredible.
This is the thing, and so if you're not honoring that and leveraging that, you're missing out.
Yeah.
You're missing out, truly. And so as far as some strategies, tips, what I mentioned about the screen curfew, that's kind of like a pulling off the Band-Aid. That's a little bit difficult. What I did was in my practice, because I saw it was such a big issue with people coming in, they got their nutrition is on point. They're moving, they're doing a lot of stuff right, but the weight isn't coming off like everybody else, or we're not getting their blood sugar normalized, or we can't get them off their lisinopril for their heart disease, whatever it is. And so once I got their sleep dialed in, everything got better. And here's the big takeaway. Knowing all these people I'd worked with at this point, the people want change, but they don't want to change that much, right? So they want change, but they don't want to change that much because they are comfortable with who they are, even if they're not happy with who they are. So I dug into the research to find what are some actionable things people can do to improve their sleep without turning their lives upside down. And so here's a very simple one. Appalachian State University researchers, they did a study to find out what's the best time of day to exercise if you want to improve your sleep quality. And so they had exercisers to train at 3 different times exclusively. At 7 a.m. for one phase, at 1 p.m. for another phase of study, and 7 p.m. in the evening for another phase. They found that the morning exercisers spent more time in the deepest, most anabolic stages of sleep. They had more efficient sleep cycles. They tended to sleep longer. And this is often overlooked. I don't talk about this much. These folks had a higher decrease in their blood pressure in the evening, which is correlated with an activation of that parasympathetic nervous system and turning off that fight or flight, all from working out in the morning. This doesn't mean that you can't work out another time, but there's something that happens by you getting up and being active in the morning that is just like your genes expect it of you, right? And this is, if you think about evolutionary biology, what will we be doing? When the sun comes up, you get out, you get busy because you're not gonna be fucking around at night because you could die, you know? And so when you do that, you're helping to set your cortisol rhythm, right? So we have and I would see this, we would do certain tests where we could see people's cortisol was elevated in the evening and too high and too low in the morning. We would call them tired and wired because cortisol is kind of this get up and it's not bad. It's when it's produced at the wrong times and wrong amounts, it can be problematic. But you need cortisol skeeting out in the morning. And so exercise helps that rhythm to get going. So you get that cortisol peak and it can gradually decline as the day goes on. So get yourself some morning exercise, even if it's just 5 minutes. You know, you could do a Tabata, you know, it takes 4 minutes, 20 seconds on, 10 seconds rest, do some squats or some push-ups back and forth. You could do some yoga, go for a power walk, just do something active in the morning to help to get that cortisol going. So that's number one. Very practical. You could still have a later day workout. That's okay. But take advantage of that cortisol rhythm reset. So that's number one. Very practical. The folks listening to this probably have some form of exercise program already, but get something in the morning. Number two, this is to be 1,000 with you guys. This is the biggest thing. And it's so overlooked. Like, we're not even at a place where society even remotely understands this. None of the things that I'm saying matters if you don't have the raw materials to make your sleep-related hormones and neurotransmitters, which is made, again, from food, all right? So if we're talking about serotonin, we're talking about protein structure, amino acid structure. Serotonin is a precursor to making melatonin. Melatonin isn't just a sleep hormone. That's a very rudimentary understanding of it. It is a master regulator of your whole circadian clock, your whole circadian timing system of your body. Melatonin is regulating, controlling a lot of your genes, all right? But serotonin is the opening act for it. It's the precursor to make it. And so, but all of the above are made from amino acids, right? So one of them is tryptophan. And we have clinical trials. This is evidence-based. If you are getting adequate amounts of tryptophan, it is going to improve your sleep quality, right? So what I call these are these good sleep nutrients. If you're deficient in any of these things, this can be, you could have the best mattress, you could have your blue light blocking glasses, you can exercise in the morning. If you're deficient in these things, your sleep isn't going to be as good, period. And so what are some of the other ones? So I mentioned tryptophan, but one of the most interesting, and this was published in the Public Library of Science, so PLOS One, vitamin C. Vitamin C is critical for regulating your sleep cycle. So they found that test subjects who were deficient in vitamin C had less efficient sleep cycles, and they tended to have more wake after sleep onset. So they would wake up more frequently during the night. Getting the vitamin C levels up helped to address this. What the fuck can't vitamin C do, man? It's really amazing. Linus Pauling won a Nobel Prize for his work with vitamin C. It's just like it never happened or something. So now here's the thing. You could take another supplement for it, food first. There are great botanical sources of vitamin C. Obviously, we know the generals, the citrus fruits, but also you got to be mindful of sugar for yourself. Kiwis, bell peppers, broccoli. But then there's this category of superfoods, which marketers screw everything up, man. Like everything is not a superfood. But I'm talking about the stuff that has so many benefits, peer-reviewed evidence, that is just like, this is a game changer. One of those is called camu-berry, C-A-M-U-C-A-M-U, camu-berry. It's the highest botanical source of vitamin C ever discovered. And man, I can go on and on with the studies. With one of these crazy studies with camu-berry, they gave rats like the worst shit. They just gave rats like high fructose corn syrup and soybean oil. Like that was their diet, like the worst shit ever. And they made it taste good so the rats would eat it. And of course, the rats, they had insulin, they developed insulin resistance, obesity, all this stuff. When they gave them camu-berry, it basically halted these negative effects of insulin resistance. It improved their insulin sensitivity, even eating this shitty food. Wow. This is a real peer-reviewed, published study, So yeah, camu-berry is one of my favorite things. You can get in like a powder, unless you want to go down to South America and go into the jungle and find some.
So something like this then?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, camu-berry. If you can, of course, try and get it organic. Reputable sources.
It's cheap too.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully this one's a good one, I should say.
Well, I could tell you the kind that I use, but I don't know if we're plugging.
You could tell us off
whatever you'd like.
Okay, so it's Paleo Valley is the company that I get it from.
There you go.
Paleo Valley, because they don't have any binders, fillers, any of that stuff. It's just a great vitamin. It's called Essential C formula. They do stuff the right way. And I know that they are listening to my show for years because I'll talk about camu-berry. Amla berry is the second botanical source, and acerola cherry. Those are my three favorites, and they made a formula with that.
Quick question.
And they didn't pay me.
The tryptophan, did you suggest that people like supplement tryptophan at night or something, or?
Food first.
Food first.
That's pretty easy to get from, people know about like turkey.
Yeah.
It's like synonymous, but also, chicken, you're going to get some with, there are some plant sources that have notable amounts of tryptophan, but it's mostly going to be in animal foods.
Gotcha.
So yeah, it's not difficult to get tryptophan. But then the thing is some people, if they're being restrictive on their diet and they're not getting in these animal foods, that might be a conflict as far as I'm getting it.
Gotcha. Okay.
Jordan, how has it been for you? Like, now, like things have worked, for your dad. Things have worked for your family. How was it maybe years ago when you guys maybe like weren't over the hump and dad was going into speech mode about like your sleep and food and like, any of these kinds of things? Did you, when you were a teenager, were you maybe like, now you're older, you're more mature, you're probably like, okay, I see what the hell dad's doing. This makes a lot of sense. I support it. I'm behind it. This is like what our family does. When you were a teenager, were you kind of frustrated maybe sometimes, or did you tune them out and be like, Dad, I just don't need another one of these speeches type thing?
My dad just let me be a kid, honestly. He made me let me make my own decisions, let me learn firsthand. So it was really up to me whether or not I followed what he said. And honestly, over time, I started to follow like what he's saying, and I'm still like incorporating it, but he never really like pressured me to do it. I just kind of, the things that I do right, I chose to do, versus him like bashing me about it.
Talk about the culture in our house.
Oh yeah, that's the biggest role, is like we all want to be healthy. We all want to do better. And there's certain things you have to do to be that way and get that way. And so it's just like a regular thing in our house, which is a blessing, honestly. So.
And what about like working out? I think your dad mentioned that he took you to the gym like when you were a kid. Yeah. And was it just like, hey, like you want to come with me today? And you just kind of popped in with him? And
man, it started back when he was in college, training at the college. I would come with him while he would train clients. And I would want to do it. I wouldn't say anything, but I would want to do it too. And then I remember we were going on vacation once, and I was in my room doing like so many push-ups, getting ready for the beach. And I'm like 12 years old. And then he took me to Gold's Gym, like officially, and I just like fell in love with it. Like I told my middle school teacher, "Oh, I just deadlifted 135." Like,
nice.
And since then, that's where I want to be, is the gym.
That's a good example for parents, because I think that parents want to maybe like, I think as an adult, I think we have maybe false images of the way that we were when we were young. Like now you could say, I'm a savage. Like I get a lot of shit done every day. Yeah. And I'm working towards always becoming more successful. And you got like markers of that. And you can see like I've made more money. I have a more successful podcast. My books are doing better. Like we have these measures. But I think when we look back, I think we think when we were younger that we were more of a savage when we were younger. Yeah. And then you want to kind of push that onto your children. But you're waking up at 5 a.m., or at least you were waking up at 5 a.m. and going to the gym on your own merit, like your own, doing it on your own. And I think that's a great way to lead, is just, hey, like this stuff can help make a better life, like your grandmother did. It sounded like she didn't like shove that on you. That's true. She's like, this is one way to live. It sounded like when you moved in with your mother, like, I don't know what way of living this is, but I don't want anything to do with this. Yeah. And so I think that's a great example for a lot of parents that listen to the show of like, you don't really have to force stuff. If you just are maybe giving good options and presenting like
exposure, like
you don't have to be frustrated and mad. Like we can go on a walk and we can have a conversation. We can talk about how I don't want you out past 11:30 or whatever the situation is. You can have a conversation about it. We can talk about it.
Yeah. You know, another thing that I've seen is that today, more than ever, what happens with our fitness as far as, adults and parents, there tends to be this dichotomy between my fitness and my kids. And so it's just like you have to choose one or the other. Yeah. And so a lot of times, mom just leaves and she goes to this place called the gym, whatever the fuck that is. And so the kid doesn't really see mom doing the thing, right? And so if we can just invite our children in a little bit more, again, just exposure to seeing mom do the thing. Or like he said, like I'm just hearing this for the first time when he would come with me to UMSL, to the university I worked at, and he wanted to mess around on the machines and lift the little weights. Like I didn't even know that, But eventually, like I could see the influence of the culture that we're creating. And so I wanted to do things with him and in front of him so he can just have this. And we know about this in neuroscience now with mirror neurons, right? So we have mirror neurons that are essentially, these neurons run a simulation of whatever you're witnessing or listening to. So as you guys are watching me talk, these mirror neurons are simulating you're talking, right? And so when we're watching fucking Fast and Furious and watching Vin Diesel do all that shit, there's a part of our brains that are simulating us doing that, Yeah. And then that's why we talk at the end, like, family, driving fast on the way home from the theater, So if we understand this is happening all the time, because kids don't just you don't just teach a kid to walk. They're watching all the time. Their brain is recording this and all the associated cells. And we know this now as well, like with visualization and seeing people improve their free throw shooting, for example, running through it, comparable to people who are actually doing it. Not to say don't go and get your reps in, but you simulating the thing. Your cells, there are certain things that are firing, that neural connection, that are just really remarkable and overlooked. So if we can add that in to create the culture to where these things, and one of the things, like, again, like he's doing stuff that I ain't even doing. Like he's getting up at, 5 a.m., 4:30, getting to the gym, but I got him around Eric Thomas, #1 motivational speaker in the world. Mm-hmm. That's his thing. He gets up 3 a.m., 4 a.m. in the morning. He's been doing that for years. And so
I love that speech when he talks about how he started waking up at 5 and then he's like 4:30 and then he's like 4 a.m. And he's like, and then 3:45.
That's exactly how it happened for me. I like the gym that I've been going to, the only available space was 6 o'clock in the morning. And then, so I was waking up at 5, going at 6. And then me and my friend were just like, let's go at 5. And it just kind of just happened. And I'm pretty sure, well,
that is a good friend
I'm not gonna push it to like 4 or anything, but
he's already pushing it.
Well,
But anyways.
Andrew has a son that's not even one yet, and he's probably
Yeah.
seeing you guys work out, you and your wife, right?
Yeah, every time I get on my like equipment and stuff, he like, he wants to go grab whatever it is, and he's barely started crawling, but he crawled to the cable machine, and he's like pulling on the handle. And I'm like, yeah, let's go. So like I take off all the weight, and I'm like lifting it for him just so he could fall backwards with it. But and also today, first day, he said "dada." So I'm fucking pumped, dude. I know, I'm so happy.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
They never say mama first.
Well, so he's been like crying mama, but then today was like official like "dada." I'm like, I'll take it.
Let's go.
I know, I'm so proud. But I did want to ask, so like it seems like you let Jorden just kind of do whatever he wanted to do. And I'm only asking this because obviously I want my son to get into lifting, sports and stuff. But if he turns around and looks at me one day and be like, Dad, I want to get into ultra marathon running, I'm gonna be like, shit, I don't know anything about that. But I'm also going to support him. But did you ever try to influence him to go a certain way? And if he went the other way, like, how did you handle that? Like, did you just kind of be patient, or like, I'm just asking for dad advice for when you hit that fork in the road. How do you sit back and just be like, so I guess swallow your pride, like, this ain't it for me right now. I'm going to do what he's going to do. Or like, what was like, I guess what happened?
Yeah. So when he says do what he wants to do, there's still that's still under the umbrella of the culture that we have created already, So we are in fact always a product of our environment. We have no choice but to be. But the thing about humans, we're creators of our environment too. So we can create and change things that outpicture and influence us and the people around us. And so within our household and our family dynamic, he's exposed to all these healthy inputs, So it's just like he has such a foundation. But also, so the part of him doing what he wants, I know that he's going to be out here in the world. So I'm not going to police him on if he's, like we're doing this, super whatever, paleo, keto, whatever, just strict whatever. And then he's going to a birthday party. Like, I'm not going to, why would I do that? Because also I want him to get the input and to see how he feels with having such a healthy template when he does a lot of that stuff, right?
And do you find that keeps you more on point? Because so I grew up, I ate, everything was frozen, right? Frozen burritos, frozen this, frozen that. And now with my son, I'm like, oh, you ain't never eaten any of that. He's eating steak already. We're Mexican, so of course he's eating tons of beans and rice. And I've noticed that like I want less stuff in the house that will like influence him also, or like right now, like I want to eat better. So what is it like knowing that your kids are just way better off than what you had growing up, as far as like their diet and nutrition?
I mean, the thing is also we can see it for ourselves. I could see this guy, like he's got it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also my youngest son, man, he's like a freaking little model, like, and he's so freaking tall. Like I was in 8th grade, I was one of the tallest kids in my class. Then my body started breaking down. Like that's when everything started to go downhill. And I'm giving the youngest kid, like he was there with me in Ferguson. Like he had some deprivation years as well. My youngest son is going to be, he's like literally the tallest kid in his class, Yeah. And so just giving him all of this stuff to give his genes the best shot to be the best expression possible, So I could see it visually. Versus, a lot of folks don't know this shit and this is one of the most messed up things in our reality. Since 1980, the rate of childhood obesity has tripled in the United States. It's tripled. Now, on top of that, with all the shutdowns that took place recently, the CDC published this, by the way. They found that childhood obesity took a massive jump. Children who were chronically obese, their annual weight gain went from about 8 pounds up to almost 15 pounds. Okay? Damn. For kids who were moderately obese, they went from an annual weight gain of around 6 pounds to almost 12 pounds. It almost doubled. And then for kids who are, quote, normal weight children, which again is we're almost at a place where it's half and half. Their annual weight gain bumped up a couple of pounds as well. Now, we might say, okay, well, this is a short-term thing. Everybody's had issues. But people don't understand the science around recidivism. And that template that you get, this when you're a kid, and when you're a kid and you venture into being overweight or obese, it becomes seemingly impossible for a lot of folks to lose that weight when they get into adulthood. And so we're starting our kids off in this very disadvantaged position because of the culture that we've created. And again, a lot of parents we're not trying to fuck our kids up. We don't want our kids to struggle and deal with all this stuff, but we're fucked up. You know, how easy is it going to be when I'm experiencing a chronic disease, like the majority of Americans? I'm in a state where my mental health is not good. I'm dealing with all this fear and anxiety of what's going on in the world right now. The list goes on and on. I'm just inundated with all this stuff. How much energy am I going to have to create that culture of health, like I've been talking about? It has an expenditure. But the beautiful part is when we engage in those things, it starts to feed into itself. Like you start to have more energy to do all this stuff and you don't even know you're doing it, you know? And so the mission now is to get folks exposed, because a part of the reason people don't do this stuff is they don't even know it exists. They don't even know it's possible. You know, much like me. I could easily not be standing here with you guys today, you know, but I got some access. I got exposure to ideas, which were there the whole time. But while I was in my mindset of, I can't get better, why won't somebody help me? You know, there's this amazing thing with the brain. It's called instinctive elaboration. Whenever you ask a question, your brain has to answer it. It's kind of like how TV producers manipulate us, like the open loop. You know, like you have to find the answer to a thing. Anything you pose your mind, especially habitually, it's constantly, you know, your reticular activating system, your reticular cortex, it's parts of your brain that are constantly looking for an environment to answer your question and to affirm what you're asking. And so if you're asking habitually, like I was for those 2 years, why me? Why me? Why me? Why won't somebody help me? I'm just looking in my environment and internal environment to affirm why me, why nobody's helping me, and how terrible of a person I am, and how much of a failure I am and not living up to my potential and all these things. I'm just feeding into it. As soon as I ask, what can I do to get healthy? Everything changed. Literally the next week, I had known this woman for probably 2 years. She was a chiropractor, you know. I thought it was all super weird. I just did. But I'd known her all this time. And when I asked that and I changed that question, within that week, she took me to Wild Oats, you know, before they got bought up by Whole Foods. And I'm seeing something I never saw before. There was a nutrition prescription book, and they had all these studies on, like, because I looked at bone density. And I was like, what the fuck? I didn't know this. It was there the whole time. I didn't have to go through those 2 years of suffering. The answer was there, but I wasn't attuned to it because of my habitual question.
Yeah, it's amazing, you know, what that a lot of times we're kind of shielded from some of that information that is now, because you've been studying it for so long, is like seems so common to us. It's hard to kind of like figure out a way to get into people's households and then have them build a culture like what you have built in your own home. What are some common things in your own home that are cultural things that you think other people could kind of look at and say, hey, that's not that hard to implement. I think we could do some of that.
Yeah. We always want to control the controllables whenever possible. You know, obviously life is going to have a lot of curveballs, a lot of things that are out of your control. One of the easiest things that you can do is, you know, everybody's together to start the day. You know, you're all kind of getting up and getting to your respective places. To start your day, like give your kids an infusion of some real nutrients, like some things that can actually fuel. Again, they're going to make their brain cells out of these things. I was on the school free lunch program and free breakfast. So I had a little red ticket and I was fueling myself on Tony the Tiger, Frosted Flakes.
Yeah.
That's what I was eating, you know? And so as well as the rest of the kids there in my school. For my kid, you know, I can give him some, you know, pastured eggs. I can give him, you know, a smoothie with all these superfoods in it. I can give him a good start, a head start. Even if he has a corn dog later, you know, whatever it is, like, this is a good opportunity. Let me start the day by giving him something of high quality. You know what I mean? And so actually, he knows this, his brother, a lot of times I'll just make him, like, I have this kind of like super, I call it superhero coffee that I make. And he has this mushroom hot chocolate mix that he has, you know? So it's like reishi mushroom and
how do you make
organic cacao. So it's this company, Four Sigmatic.
Okay,
right? So
yeah, got you. Okay,
dual
cool.
extracted mushroom, you know, those are my guys.
Cool.
And so he's intermittent fasting like 4 days a week, you know, because he'll do that. 2 days ago, I came home from the gym. It was like 11 a.m., maybe close to noon. And all he had was that. And I was just like, and I thought maybe his mom had made him something.
Your 10-year-old son.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he was just sitting on the couch, I think he was reading something. And I was like, did you eat something? Because I was about to make something. And he was like, no, he's not tripping. Like, he's okay, But so, but it's a part of the culture. And it was also like, I make my wife her coffee and me, and then make his little drink. And then boom, this guy's already out at the gym, coming back, making his, 24 eggs or whatever it is. You know what I mean? But yeah, it's just these simple things, especially starting the day. And by the way, this is when he's not going on campus to do something. This is like when he's at home. Like right now, as I mentioned, I was talking to him about the economies of scale and these government subsidies, because of what's taking place in the world, it's forced me to, we do a mixture of homeschool now, which if we think about this, and if I'm honest with my own heart, this is what I should have been doing in the first place, because I'm teaching him real shit they can actually use in his life and to serve and help other people.
And people always say, why isn't this taught in school? Well,
Right.
It's probably not supposed to be taught in school. It should be taught in your house.
That's it. That's it, And so one of the biggest issues facing our world today right now, truly, this is one of the, I'd say, 3 biggest issues is our education system. And all that's taking place in the world is making people to reassess these things, which is very healthy. And now that it's so fluxed up and malleable, it's easier to change, because we've been outsourcing our children's education to people. We don't even know these fucking people, first of all. No disrespect, Miss Blackmore. Thank you. I shout out to my good teachers that I've had over the years, but I've had some not good teachers, And also, what are they teaching our children? A big foundational tenet within our school system is compliance. And so you have a certain way, this is right and wrong. You do this our way or you fail.
Yeah.
You do this our way, you sit down. Their innate drive of a child is to play and to move. And the bad kids, and what do? We medicate them. Like, this whole thing is fucked up. Like, there's no part of it that's okay. And also, what are we teaching them? So many things that have literally zero value to their life and their success. We're not teaching them about practical things as well, And so we're teaching several generations of children how to be workers in jobs that don't exist, in a sense, if they can even piece it together to be trained for those things, And so we're not getting these practical education. And also, that's what changed with me was, instead of me dissecting this worm and the teacher like giving me a fail or a pass, now I understand, like, oh shit, like, part of the reason I have so much more energy now is because there's a change that took place with my mitochondria. I learned about the mitochondria in this class, but it was here today, gone today. Like, I was just trying to get past this test. I didn't get it. Now I'm in love with it. Like, my son is here. He knows all day, every day. I'm talking every day. Even when you're sleeping or you're kicking it on Sundays, I still take time off, but I'm researching, and I'm taking this and I'm thinking as I'm going through all of these peer-reviewed journals, just in the last year alone, a couple thousand peer-reviewed journals I've analyzed, all right? The reps that I have, but here's what I do. As I'm analyzing this, I'm thinking, how can I teach this? How can I make this unnecessarily complex jargon by academics? And I used to do that too. I was writing as if I'm, trying to be, and speaking in that language, versus how can you make this make sense for the public who needs this right now? As I talked to you guys earlier about circadian medicine, that's affecting everybody every microsecond of our lives, but most people have no idea about it. They have the right to know. We don't need 20 years before this becomes common knowledge. How can I teach this right now? So that's what I do.
When you were saying, why me? I think the biggest difference with that is, I think a lot of times people think that the things that we can do, the things that we can have done to ourselves, I think people think will have the same impact as the things that we can do for ourselves. And they certainly don't. They're way different, because when you go and explore the things that you can actually go and do for yourself, like go on a walk, go on a jog, lift some weights, start to analyze your diet a little bit, maybe look at your sleep, say my sleep sucks, maybe your job is super stressful, maybe your relationship is super stressful, we start to look inward. That's where you find all the answers. So a lot of times when somebody is kind of saying, why me? Well, it's you, because you have to look inward to find all the answers.
Yeah. I tell this to people who are doing, who are coaches. I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of physicians and nurse practitioners over the years, but anybody who's working with people, especially in health, if you simply ask people the questions and listen to them, they'll tell you the cause and cure of whatever it is that's going on in their life. They already know. It's already within them. But what we tend to do is try to tell people our thing. Like, here's what you need to do. Instead of like, just ask key questions, dig around, let them tell you, because they already know, and just listen.
Can you give us an example, maybe an example of somebody that you're helping that's maybe just pretty overweight?
Yeah. So let me think of a specific person I could tell you about. Okay. So this amazing woman comes in, she's a very successful lawyer, very prominent in our city, and she's not happy with how she looks. She's stressed. She doesn't really feel capable. She kind of identifies herself as an athlete because, what she did in high school, even though it's like, 20, 30 years later. And she's kind of lost herself in that aspect. She still has a sense of empowerment about her. And so, one of the first things I do is just, of course, just ask people the surface thing, which is, what your goals are. And a lot of times people don't even know that, or they give you something very superficial. Or a lot of times people in my office, they would just like pull their shirt up and grab their, like, I just want to get rid of this. Like, if I could I like my butt and my legs, but just they grab their belly and shake it at me. I guess maybe people felt comfortable to do that. I'm just thinking of how many times that happened. So for them, they just want to get this weight off. But why is it there? Like, what are the things, the underlying mechanisms that put you in this position? We got to get there, because I could tell you what to do, but if you still have this identity and these behavior patterns that got you in this place, we're never going to get there. And so, I start digging and I ask, okay, so for example, if you achieve this goal, if we're able to, get 4 inches off your waist in the next 2 months, what would that mean to you? Like, what is going to be different about your life? And so she's like, I feel better in my clothes. I would have more confidence. And I'm starting to dig around here and starting to hear she's leaning into like, I want to look good for my husband, and also, she has kids and she wants to be an example for them. Right. And so she's starting to share these things, but there's like specklings of it. So eventually I get these things out that what she really wants, she wants to feel confident again. She wants to use this confidence. She sees herself, if she can just feel good about herself, she's going to perform better as a lawyer as well. So I find another leverage point. So performing better as a lawyer, her major identity, lawyer, family, right? And so we started to lean into these things. And her daughter she was dating a guy. She's going to be getting married, right? And so I'm just like, okay, I can use this as well. She's going to be there, the dress, all that stuff, and wanting to be an example of what a couple can be, right? Because she felt like she showed her daughter that she can lose touch with her health over the years. So she wanted to show that you can have it all and be healthy, right? So that's the thing for her were those things. She believed that she had to sacrifice her health in order to be successful, right? And so the solution was making it a part of her life, making it herself a priority, which she had never done before. She made her work a priority, right? And so what I focused on with her, which is what you guys do, was getting her stronger, because she was carrying a lot. And man, so once she started pulling stuff off the ground, just getting physically stronger, she lost some inches off her waist. She became so much more powerful, like a powerful presence was unlocked, and so she just felt more, even she told me like, Shawn, I carried all the groceries in one trip, like shit like that, like was so impressive to her, so I hope I answered the question. I might've gotten off track a little bit there, but it's just finding that thing within somebody's psychology and leveraging that you know, because she knew what it was. It was her putting herself last, her physical health last. And she was able to share that because she was trying to be successful and pave a way for her children who are now getting to be older. And she feels like she had kind of lost herself.
Well, that kind of stuff is great because I think that, you know, like maybe in this person's life or maybe just as other examples, maybe in the case of the husband, maybe the husband, you know, has some other people at work that are really good looking and now the wife's like, like I better, okay, I should probably step my shit up. You know, there's things like that happen. And when you start talking to people and you start to kind of get to the root of the problem, I have found you go a couple questions deep and a lot of times somebody starts to cry. And they're like, well, you know, my dad told me this when I was a kid and I've always kind of doubted. And you're like, oh my God, this is just crushing. But we can get somebody out of this situation simply by what you're talking about with correct foods.
You know what's so crazy is that I just remember this. Again, the road to get to being being healthy is actually ridiculously simple. You know, just eat real stuff, move your body some, sleep. That's pretty much it. Like this is not difficult. Well, I mean, let me not say that. This is not complex necessarily. Now, what people would usually do in my office is that when they have the awareness of what needs to be done, they understand their body, now the practicality of getting there, they start blaming. Well, I could, but my husband. I could, but my kids. Kids got the most hatred in my office as far as like the parents blaming them for all their stuff. Like, your mom, well, I mean, I understand, but my kids just won't eat it, you know, and we're talking about you. Like people already start with the finger pointing and blame because of their personal responsibility as well. So we got to find a way to engage that sense of sovereignty and responsibility as well, because in our culture, we've outsourced so much of this stuff to other people. And, you know, just an example of like how psychologically we can gain weight as a protection mechanism. My mother, when I was probably 7 years old, she worked overnight at a 7-Eleven type place. It was called Magic Market. And, you know, this is just when I would go to her, I lived in my grandma's house still, but I'd go to her house on the weekends. And I slept on the floor, you know, me and my little brother on a little pallet. It's roaches and, you know, mice traps by us and all this stuff. And, but anyway, so she would go to this job overnight. My stepfather worked during the day. She got stabbed 8 times by somebody trying to rob her. But she ended up, my mom is man, like she's fucking, my son knows. Man. She's like Wolverine, man. Like she actually pinned him down and held him until the police came, right? And so when she goes into the hospital to get all these stitches for these stab wounds, okay, she got stabbed 8 times. And the doctor told her, your weight saved your life. If you were not heavy set like you are, you would have died. Her being fat saved her life. What do you think she's gonna do now? Do you think she's ever gonna lose this weight? It's protecting her. It's saving her life, right? And so from there, like that was when she was always just kind of, you know, a bit bigger. But from that moment on, it just went really downhill, you know? And so what are the things we tie up psychologically? And this is real, you know, a lot of people, we have these defense mechanisms, you know, and how we do things with our bodies, how we hide, how we protect ourselves. And so that's other work that needs to be done for a lot of folks too. You know, it's like getting to the core of like one of the best examples, Katie Wellness Mama. I don't know if you know Katie. She's got a massive brand for like, you know, natural skincare and natural cures for things and like, you know, big mommy bloggers type stuff. And she's got 6 kids, by the way, too. They're all homeschool. I went to her house in Florida. I couldn't believe it. Like there was like a 3-year-old like flying a drone and shit. Like it was crazy. Like doing all the Rubik's Cubes in like 5 seconds. I'd never seen, if I didn't see this, I wouldn't think it's possible. Like I think the kid was 3 years old, but using a straight up steak knife and just like cutting their steak. I'm just like, doing their own laundry, all of this stuff. And I'm just looking at because I think my son Braden was maybe 5 at the time. I'm just like, you're fucking up. Like, you got to get to work. And since then, like, he's been doing his own laundry. But anyways, but she had invested so much in her kids' sustainability of the household so that they're self-sufficient. And she had constantly been struggling with her weight all this time, though. And she shared with me, because now, it's taken her years to figure it out. It's something that she didn't expect, which was dealing with her psychology and something that happened during her childhood, that she felt safe and protected. She felt that she wouldn't be, in a sense, like wanted or aggressed if she was carrying this weight. And when she realized this, and she broke down, and she's a very even keel human being. And, you know, again, I'm just sharing what's already out there on, you know, on my show. But all she did was she healed her psychology. And again, your thoughts are creating chemistry in your body. Every single thought, all the time. Now, that doesn't mean that she isn't doing sprints. Like, she started doing stuff she had never done before. The weight started coming off, but each step along the way, she leaned into it. She started doing pole vault, and she was heavy, right? And so she started getting some of this weight off, started pole vaulting. There she is. Yeah.
Shit.
Incredible.
Drastic.
Incredible, you know? And so for her, also doing things that she wouldn't have thought to do, like eating a lot of protein, for example. You know, like each step along the way supported the process, but the triggering event was her dealing with her psychology and her feeling that, you know, she needed her weight as a protection.
You know, I'm curious, how do you approach changing people's psychology and belief? Because you know who Joe Dispenza is?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious what you think of some of his stuff, because some people read his stuff and they're like, oh, this is too out there, too woo-woo. Yeah. But I mean, the power of the subconscious is a really weird thing. Like, I'm a big believer of, like, you know, the things that you're inputting on your social media feed, the things that you're watching or whatever, it's going to affect the way you think and believe things. Yeah. So how do you handle that? How do you, like, how did you teach that to your kids to pay attention to that? Just how do you go about that?
One of Joe's books is, I believe the title is You Are the Placebo.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Right? And so it's just digging into some of the science that, you know, again, I've been studying and teaching for many years as well. And Joe, I've had a great conversation with Joe. It's one of the most popular episodes of my show.
Okay. But
the thing I really like about Joe is that he continuously does find places to integrate logic and science, you know, but also he is leaning into things that are beyond our scientific description. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean that they don't exist. It doesn't mean that they're not real. He had a similar story to mine, like his saying, you know, you're never going to walk again. He was in a tragic accident, and he was able to heal and come back from something that was supposed to be impossible. Same thing with me. If I'm coming back from something you say is impossible and I do that thing, I have a certain level of power and understanding that you can't buy that, you know? And so somebody like, I'll give you a good example. When I was living in Ferguson, when my mother-in-law gave me a film that he was in, that's kind of started his initial super popularity. It's called What the Bleep Do We Know? Mm-hmm. All right. It was about all this like quantum physics. And when I first watched it, and this was probably, I don't know when it came out, but maybe I'm just gonna say 15 years ago, I fell asleep on it. And my son knows I don't fall asleep on stuff. Like, I don't. But it was just so like, what is this shit? I just like completely dismissed it. Cut to a year later. At this point, my mother-in-law's been teaching meditation for like 40 years or something. Okay. Bananas. But now, you know, she taught me meditation. Now I'm like really understanding that I have agency over the way that I think. Prior to that, I was just existing, you know, like I wasn't aware that I was aware. I wasn't aware that these thoughts, like I can see the thoughts now, like, and I can disassociate and I could change them, right? I start to develop all of this power and this beauty that was already existing in me. So now I'm learning meditation. I see What the Bleep Do We Know 6 months later. I'm just like, my jaw's on the floor, like, oh my God, like this is how it all works. Like, this is how reality works, you know? And so what they were talking about, for example, was, I'll give you guys an example. Have you ever heard of the phantom DNA experiment?
No.
I have not. No.
Okay. So some Russian scientists, and people can look this up, it's called the phantom DNA experiment. They used a vacuum, right? So not like a floor cleaning vacuum, but like a vacuum chamber where there's nothing else in there. Everything is pulled out of this, right? And so, but they know still within this study, within the vacuum, there are going to be packets of light, that all of reality is made of these biophotons. There's nothing you can do about that, right? But other than that, there's nothing else in this chamber. And so what they did was they put in a strand of human DNA into the vacuum and sealed it. And something really interesting happened. The biophotons that were just randomly scattered throughout the vacuum chamber began to conform to the human DNA. They all became attracted and conformed literally to the shape of the human DNA. So something about human DNA affected the stuff that the reality is made of. All right. Our reality is made of these biophotons. And so just the human DNA just being present changed the reality, how things were conformed. Now, they thought that when they take the DNA out, of course, the biophotons are going to go back to their scattered formation. But what happened was when they removed the human DNA, the biophotons still stayed conformed as if the human DNA was still there. So it made at least a temporary imprint on reality just with the presence of human DNA. Now, if you scale that out a little bit and you understand that we are literally affecting the environment around us, period. I'm just giving one example of how we're doing this. There's string theory. Research, the US military is like the goats of having all this data and not sharing this shit, but like doing experiments where people are in different states and having, stimulation, which, they're probably electrocuting them, things of the like, and another person being able to pick up that and changing their heart rate or changing their, using an EEG or, magnetoencephalograph and these different things to monitor what their physiological response is based on something happening to somebody else. But another really cool experiment was researchers at Yale University. They had people just come together, and it's already happened for us since we've been here. What happened was they just had two people, didn't know each other, just create rapport for a few minutes. Then they separately, analyzed their brainwave activity, and they saw that their brainwaves began to sync up just by them being in conversation with each other. So literally it's like a dance that takes place. We can't see it happening, but our brains start to sync up, right? So we're affecting other people as well. So we're affecting the environment, we're affecting other people. And so these are all things that Joe's been teaching for a long time. And so again, how do we practically apply this? We have to understand how powerful we are. Right now, even people who are about that life and trained, they're falling victim to all this negativity that's taking place. And it's influencing them deeply. And I'll be honest, it's happened to me a couple of times, but I have the tools to get out of it, because we care. And also if idiocy is taking place and the world is just completely gone bonkers, it's going to bother you. But I realized, again, I'm not just at the effect of the environment, I'm creator of the environment. And also I can be a light. I can be something that changes the environment when I come into it versus me being at the mercy of it. So it's having that practical tool and that knowledge that no matter what's going on in the world, bring it to it. You bring the energy to it. And we all need our cup filled. So surround yourself with people who are able to give you. And the cool thing about today is that you don't have to be in the room face to face with the person, but just immersing yourself in people who remind you of how powerful you are, and making that a daily practice as well.
There's other research too, like where people just will write something down. They'll write down their goal. And there's people that just because they simply took the time to write down their goal, they are more likely to be successful. Not always do they hit that exact goal, but just the intention of having a goal, setting a goal, having the courage to write it down. Because a lot of times the goals can be a little challenging. They can be a little scary. Yeah. Where you're like, I don't know if I'll be able to make that, but I'm going to write it down anyway.
Yeah. The best way to not achieve your goal is to not have any. Right. And that research is Dr. Gail Matthews. I actually talked about her in Eat Smarter in my latest book. So we got all this cutting edge, amazing nutrition science. The first part of the book is dedicated to nutrition and metabolism. The second part is dedicated to nutrition and cognitive performance, emotional intelligence as well, how our nutrition affects our ability to have empathy and the ability to have patience, these kind of like soft skills. And then also there's a chapter in there, I had to talk about it, is good sleep nutrients and how your nutrition affects your sleep. But the last part of the book is really dedicated to the psychology of all this stuff. You just learned all this cool shit. Now what? Like, what can we actually do about this in practical ways? And one of those is the science around goal setting. It's one thing to have a goal, and it's great. Again, like that's the first step. But writing the goal down, the research indicated it was like a 30% increase in folks achieving the goal, 30 to 40% increase simply by writing it down. It like unlocks some kind of, and again, the researchers are looking at, they're doing a randomized trial. And just having these folks, if they just write it down, they achieved more than the people who didn't write it down because the thing's just rattling around in their head. And of course, I'm just always like, why? Like, why? I think a practical piece of that is it takes courage to write it down. It takes courage to say, I want this. So you're actually taking an action step by declaring like, I want this 50-pound weight loss, or I want this car, and actually writing it down. And it's also creating a physical thing in the world as well. Like as you're spelling it out, it's like casting a spell in a sense. You know what I mean? Like you're creating something physical out of your thought. Like, this is what I want. So you're making it's kind of like a declaration to life. Like I'm serious about this, So yeah, just that. And also another thing they found in the study, they had even more success, higher rate of goal achievement when people had accountability, So this doesn't mean that you tell everybody your goals,
Right.
but just having somebody that you can share this with who holds you accountable, who just like who can check in with and like, hey, how's it going on such and such? When we have community and support, it does tend to help.
All right, YouTube family. So we cut the episode short here because we started getting into some topics that we quite literally cannot talk about here on the platform. So if you guys want to hear the rest of the episode for free, go to iTunes. Go to iTunes or Spotify or any podcast platform and download and listen to the rest of the episode. But we're going to go ahead and sign off here.
And also, please follow the podcast at Mark Bell's Power Project on Instagram, at MB Power Project on TikTok and Twitter. My Instagram and Twitter is at I am Andrew Z, at the Andrew Z on TikTok. And Sima, where are you at?
And Sima Inyang on Instagram and YouTube, and Sima Yin Yang on TikTok and Twitter. Shawn and Jorden.
At Real Jorden on Instagram.
How did you got Real Jorden? Like nobody else had that?
Is that
like,
L and L or is it an I? Is it real?
It's just Real.
REALJORDEN.
Yeah,
you
Real
really got
Jorden.
that.
It's
That's
fucking
actually
amazing.
crazy.
JORDEN.
Oh, okay.
And Dad, one of your jobs as a father is to be protective of your son. How are you protecting him against all the pussy that's out there?
I'm going to plead the fifth. I've talked about a lot of stuff today.
Good looking kid, you got to be careful.
Yeah, I mean,
Right?
just values, man. Just values, That's it. That's all I can give them. So
Where you at?
Great
I'm at-
stories. Learn through your lessons.
There you go.
Right. Yeah. No, for real. I'm at Shawn Model on Instagram. It's SHAWNMODEL on Instagram. I pop in and do a little tweet every now and then. I'm at Shawn Model there as well. But Instagram is where I frequent the most.
Thank you guys so much for your time, and I thought that was really an interesting way of putting it because when you talked about the pandemic, oftentimes people will say, oh yeah, like that dude was around during the time of the Great Depression, and they say it as a positive because they say like that hardened that individual, like he knows what it's like to go through some tough times or some hard shit, and maybe in the future people will say that about the pandemic. That guy was, around the time of the pandemic. Remember that shit? And, so hopefully some positive will come of it. Maybe it'll make people stronger in the long run, and maybe it will make us question the authority, which is always a good idea. Thank you guys so much again for your time. Really appreciate it. Strength is never a weakness. Weakness is never a strength. Catch you guys later.